Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us. We're going to go ahead and get started now. Michelle, over to you.
Thank you, Alyssa. Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar, Closing the Skills Gap, Advancing Workforce Development in Public Sector IT. This is a collaborative webinar presented by Leadership Connect. My name is Michelle Anderson, and I am Vice President here at Leadership Connect. As many of you know, the public sector is navigating a critical moment. The demand for digital transformation is rising fast, but the IT workforce needed to support that change is under strain. Agencies are working hard to recruit, train, and retain the next generation of public sector IT professionals. But closing the skills gap requires more than just new hires. It takes strategic partnerships, reskilling initiatives, and modernized approaches to workforce development. Whether you're building cyber readiness, scaling cloud infrastructure, or aligning your agency with evolving tech mandates, it all comes down to people and how we prepare them for the mission. Today, we're bringing together two leaders who are deeply invested in the future of federal IT workforce and who are shaping solutions that make a difference. So today, we'll explore how agencies are tackling the public sector IT skills gap, what it takes to build and scale effective workforce development programs, how government can partner with industry, academia, and training partners to meet urgent talent needs, and most importantly, how to empower a diverse, mission-ready IT workforce for the future. I do have a few housekeeping notes before we begin. We are a certified NASBA CPE credit sponsor, so if CPE credits are something you're interested in obtaining, please listen up. This webinar is up for one CPE in the information technology field of study. In order to receive credit, please ensure you meet the attendance and participation requirements. For this webinar, we'll ask 3 polling questions. If you're interested in obtaining a CPE credit, you must answer all 3. And as a reminder, Leadership Connect is registered with the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy, NASBA, as a sponsor of continuing professional education on the National Registry of CPE Sponsors. State boards of accountancy have final authority on the acceptance of individual courses for CPE credit. Complaints regarding registered sponsors may be submitted to the National Registry of CPE Sponsors through their website. We encourage you to ask questions, engage with our speakers, and share your insights throughout today's session. But now it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers who are waiting patiently. First, we have Joni Newhart, who's the Associate Administrator for Acquisition Workforce Programs within the Office of Federal Procurement Policy in the Office of Management and Budget. And then we have Dave Hinchman, Director of Information Technology and Cybersecurity at the Government Accountability Office. Hi, Joni. Hi, Dave. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi.
Good to see you both. I'd love to first, before we get too far into anything, talk a little bit about your roles. So let's begin maybe by grounding our audience. Can you each share a bit about your current role and how it connects to IT and workforce development efforts across the government? Joni, I'll let you go first.
Great. Thank you, Michelle. Really delighted to be here today. So as Michelle mentioned, I'm in the Office of Federal Procurement Policy within OMB, and we are doing a lot of things in the acquisition space, and we interface with IT all the time. We're trying to get our folks IT smart, IT savvy, and all of our office recognizes that the workforce is the foundation of everything that we do, but I'm the lucky one that gets to focus on it with focusing on acquisition workforce and making sure that they are strong so that they can spend our taxpayer dollars very, very wisely. They buy about $1 trillion worth of products and services for the government, many of which are IT. As a matter of fact, my former CIO at the Department of Transportation, Dan Mintz, I was the SPE there, the Senior Procurement Executive, and we talked all the time, and he told me, IT is everything, Joni, so don't ever forget that. And here, 20 years later, I really haven't forgotten it. So I think over to you, Dave.
All right, thanks. And thanks to Leadership Connect for the invitation to be here today. Really appreciate it. Again, my name is Dave Hinchman. I'm a Director of IT and Cybersecurity at the U.S. Government Accountability Office. For those of you not familiar, GAO is an independent legislative branch agency, and we work for Congress to help them better understand issues where they're conducting oversight. We generally do performance reviews at congressional request. We write reports, make recommendations on how executive branch programs can be improved, and then follow up on those recommendations. My particular portfolio within the IT and cybersecurity team is critical infrastructure cybersecurity, cloud computing security, business systems modernization, including an IRS, and what I now call the technology workforce. So IT workforce, cyber workforce, and increasingly AI workforce is an issue that we're running across. And that's what brings me here today to talk about how the federal government's attacking this.
Well, that's great. I appreciate you both being here. Excited for our conversation, and I love, where you're both coming from and the perspectives that you're going to bring to today's conversation. So maybe we can start with I don't want to say a simple question, but what drives your work in this space? What's the most urgent or exciting aspect of your mission today? Maybe Dave, we'll start with you, and then Joni, move to you.
Sure. So, for me, and this has been interesting in the evolution, I've had this current portfolio for about 5 years. And it's the growth of the workforce issues that we struggle with. Cyber has been increasingly important across the federal government as the federal government has gotten more online, gotten more connected. As citizens in the US, we've become more connected. And now the growth of that and the amount of employees across the federal government that are performing cyber functions and the degree to which that's being managed is of huge congressional interest right now. We just came out with a report a couple of weeks ago looking at how federal agencies manage their cyber workforces. And then as well as the growth of AI. I think the government is in its baby steps with the artificial intelligence journey. But now is the time to start thinking about how they manage that workforce, to make sure we have the right people in the right place with the right skills. And I think a lot of the lessons we've learned from looking at the cyber workforce can be applied to AI as well, because they're both specialty workforces. And we need to understand where we have our needs and where we need to get the right resources in place.
I love that. And I think it makes a lot of sense. The evolution of the workforce, is something that it's evolved so greatly over the years, and it just continues to evolve so quickly. And I think that's a few of the things we'll talk about today. Joni, what about you? What drives your work in this space, or what's the most urgent or exciting aspect of your mission today?
It's so interesting that we share a lot of challenges with our colleagues in IT and finance and performance. But what's driving my particular office, you may have heard about a little thing called the revolutionary FAR overhaul. It's like, the biggest thing that's happened in the 40 years that we've had the FAR. What it basically amounts to is we're skinning up the FAR to just cover statutory provisions. So you can imagine over the years, everything kept being layered on the FAR, everything, and it became, I don't know how big, huge. But now that's all going to change, and we're going to stick to the statutory. And what that means is that the contracting folks and their customers, they now have some discretion, and they're allowed to do things like, critically think. Imagine trying to get the best deal and being able to do so without all of these layers of bureaucracy and everything that they have to know. It's really amazing. I'm so pleased to be a part of this. So it's focused on agility and getting the best deal for the customer. The KOs, the contracting folks, can actually figure out the best way to do things. We will have best practices for them, so we don't have to figure it out in 24 different agencies. We're going to share them. Imagine sharing best practices across the government. It's mind-bending, but I'm really excited about it. We're on a super fast timeline. Matter of fact, right after this webinar, I have to get back to work. But it's going to affect everybody, IT, procurement, and it's going to be a really fantastic thing. So more to look forward to on that.
Thanks, Joni. I think that's really actually exciting to hear, and I'm sure inspiring to a lot of folks. Technology is moving quickly, and to have that sort of change coming along with the movement is really great to hear. Let's talk a little bit about, the federal IT skills gap. Dave, from your perspective, where is the skills gap most pressing in federal IT right now? Are we talking more about cyber or cloud, AI, or something broader like systems integration or mission alignment?
All of the above. I think not to be too snarky. I think it's an interesting question. And I think it depends on how you want to look at it. If you drill down into an agency or maybe a bureau or subcomponent, I think you can find really solid IT management practices where folks are looking at what their needs are, they're doing workforce analysis, they're doing gap analysis, they've got a strategy, they've got a plan for how they're going to bring it together. But I also think that the higher you lift that view, getting to the overall agency level and ultimately the federal government level, the story becomes a lot murkier. I think it's hard to coordinate all of that across huge sprawling organizations. If you think about some of the larger federated organizations, larger federated departments in the government, I think that becomes a real challenge. And so it's easier for them to delegate down to these bureaus and subcomponents. And then you take it up to the overall federal government, and then I think it's really hard. I mean, this is millions of employees that you're trying to manage and understand. Where do we have our resources? Where are gaps? Where do we need to put people? And so I think that's a real challenge. And again, and I want to be sure to give credit, there are pockets of really solid performance that we've seen in some of our reviews. And so the story isn't grim, but I think that there's just more coordination that we as auditors who look across the government to best understand how this issue is evolving that we'd like to see.
That makes a lot of sense. And do you see the challenge more as a talent shortage, a development gap, or is it the coordination issue across the agencies?
It's a little bit of all things. I think, I think talent is hard to attract for the federal government, especially in specialty positions. We always, the stories about how you're fighting the private sector and you lose on pay alone. But I think that there are people in this country who want to come work for government. They believe in making the government a better place. They believe in improving citizen services. And so that's part of your recruitment strategy that you should have. How do you find those people? How do you attract them and provide that, impetus that's going to say, hey, you know what, you're not going to make as much as some of those folks in the private sector, but here's all this other great stuff we're going to provide. I started in this job a little over 23 years ago, thought I was going to be here for 2 years, and then I got the public service bug, and now I'm hooked. And so I think that there's definitely ways to attract the right folks, and there are folks who are interested. It's a matter of sort of creating that match and getting in front of them so that they know where to go and how they can get involved in improving government.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. And I love the whole aspect of the recruitment strategy. I think you're right. I think there are people out there who have that calling, and as long as you can tap into that calling and then help them progress, and then we can retain some really great people and a skilled workforce. Joni, to jump back to you for a minute, for the acquisition workforce, do you see an IT skills gap? And if so, where would that be?
Yes, absolutely. So there's a poll. Okay.
Oh.
The IT skills gap, our workforce, the acquisition workforce, is historically an older workforce. I'll say it, a more seasoned workforce. So people like me, I kind of grew up and missed the data training, the technology training. So we need to get back into it to be able to catch up with it. And I think that's going to be easy to do because there's a lot of training out there. Honestly, there's, sorry, I keep looking at that poll thing. Let me take that off of my screen and then I won't be distracted by it. Okay, so that's better. And I think the U.S. Digital Services, which I believe is there's still pieces of it left. That's a great model to attract people from outside the government in. They signed up people for a couple years. They got to experience government, and a lot of them, like you, Dave, got the government public service bug, and I think a lot of them are still around. But I think a lot of this has to do with the stories. For example, we had a contracting officer who won an Acquisition Excellence Award a few years ago, and her big story was that she, as a contracting officer, was annoyed by all the checklisty things she had to do, the admin things she had to do. And she's like, there's a better way. So she, on her own, went out and learned coding. And I don't recommend this for everybody, but she went out and learned coding, and she developed these bots to help some of these challenges. And now she's in charge of a whole group. That's what they do. But some of this is born out of frustration. But if we can unleash and learn these AI and the robotic process automation things, we can get rid of those rote, checklisty template things that we do and really add value, because our workforce is a highly trained workforce and they are capable of amazing things. Just need to kind of unleash them. And I think this will let us do that.
I love that. I love it. Unleash and learn. And you mentioned, training. So I would love to kind of dive in a little bit there. Like, how are you seeing agencies make the case for long-term workforce investment in an environment with budget constraints, or hiring freezes?
I see it happening. I see it in the agencies, and really, if you can invest some money, you will get it back in spades. And maybe one example is our efforts in category management. So we have an IT section there. That is basically where you buy common goods and services collectively. You unleash the power, the buying power of the government. And that's a really good example of how we can make this happen. And I think it's a model that the government can use, and it's been really quite successful. And investing in the workforce will allow you to take advantage of all of their training, and that delivers back in spades with the mission critical procurements, with the best value, with getting the best vendors, all of that. If you can invest in them, it will come back to you. And we have example after example of those cases that have been made. And so I see a lot more of that going on. How about you, Dave?
Yeah, I think that the way I think about it, yes, it takes money to make money, right? If you invest in your workforce, you're going to see the returns. And I think for me, a lot of it comes down to putting a framework around how you manage your employees. We've done the work on this. We put out what we call, it's like selected leading practices. We talked to government, we talked to private sector, and came up with basically 15 things that cover both the recruitment and the retention about how to manage your employees. And lots of times we'll go out and we'll do audits, and we'll go in and look and see how an agency's doing with that. And I feel like for executives to take the time to even just do the strategic workforce planning part of that, which is step one, which has a couple sub steps, but that in itself is going to produce growth, because that's going to help you get to the gap analysis. It's going to help you understand where you need to be recruiting, where are your weak spots going to be down the road from now, so that you understand how your workforce is evolving and aging, and perhaps retiring. And so I think that that's, for me, it's a very programmatic perspective, but that's something that we wish we would see more of when we go and talk to agencies.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think, Joni said it, when you invest, you'll see the returns. And I think if you do that, and what you say about creating a framework, it helps you see those weak spots and really fill them in and create that plan. I guess going off a framework, like what's one framework or program, Dave, that you think more agencies should know more about?
Well, I'll use the cyber side of my work. CyberCorps Scholarship for Service has been hugely successful. It's run through OPM and managed by National Science Foundation. This is a program which allows students to apply for scholarships from the federal government, which are funded by the federal government and administered through colleges and universities. And it's to get a cybersecurity or IT related degree. When you come out of the program, you owe as many years of government service as you received in years of scholarship. So if you get 3 years of scholarship, you're going to come work for the federal government for 3 years. And the idea is that that's one way to get people involved in government service, right? Sure, some folks are probably going to view this as an avenue for paying for school, but others will be attracted and get involved in cyber, and it's going to be a great fit, and they're going to stick around and maybe make a career out of it. And so I think that's something that's hugely popular. And I know in the last probably year and a half, Congress has approached us a couple of times, different folks thinking about how they could expand CyberCorps to much more significant. For census scale, the program was created, I think the first graduates came out in 2002 or 2003. But since then, they've made about over 5,000 scholarship awards. But I think there are folks on the Hill who see the success of the program and getting folks into cyber careers and view that as potentially something that could be beefed up to really become an ascension and recruitment tool for federal cyber workers.
Oh, that's great. And Joni, do you have anything you'd like to add there?
Sure, yeah. DoD just in the last few years started this really interesting program called the Defense Civilian Training Corps. And they take folks in, I think, 4 different colleges, and they immerse them into acquisition and government, federal government, for 2 years, I believe, or so. And so by the time they graduate from college, they also owe some time to the government, but they are coming, they're younger people, they're IT focused, and so they're going to come into the government, and they're not going to allow us not to be, you know, IT savvy, not to have the platforms they're used to. They're not going to do stuff at home and then come to work and be like, oh, I have to do everything on paper. That's not going to happen. So I think it's great to get these folks in the government, and it's great to bring them along while they're in college so that they come and they have a fresh perspective, and I think that always helps. Another program that I'm particularly fond of, because I was one of the founders of it, is DITAP. It's Digital IT Acquisition Professional. So what we tried to do, it's been in existence for about 10 years, and getting folks into a 6-month immersive program. This is existing government employees. They stay in their job, but they have this 6-month, part virtual, part in person program that's different than any other acquisition training program we have, and it really immerses them in digital services. So they'll be writing blogs, they'll be shadowing some IT professionals, some CIOs. They're becoming ambassadors for technology in the agencies and digital services. So what comes out of there is a group of people that are re-energized about federal service. I've heard more than one, so we have a couple thousand graduates now, and they come out, they're maybe mid-level folks, and they're re-energized, where before they were just like, you know, beaten down, like, oh, all of this acquisition stuff is too much. And then they're like, oh, I can do things, I can make change, I can do all these great things. And that's what I love to see. And that infects the whole community to kind of lift everyone up. So I love programs like both of those.
I love that. And I think, you know, when you have these great programs to attract the right people, bring them in, you said infect earlier, Dave said, you know, get the public service bug, you know, that's really fantastic and what we need. And I love what you said about re-energizing for, you know, that public service bug. That's great. I think the second poll is going to pop up now. Hopefully everybody saw the first poll that popped up earlier. Please go ahead and participate in the second poll, which is, what is your organization's biggest challenge in building or maintaining a skilled IT workforce? And while everyone's doing that, maybe we'll pivot a little bit into the topic more on readiness for emerging tech, whether it's AI, cloud, or cyber. You know, Joni, maybe you can start us off. You know, how are agencies approaching workforce development for emerging technologies? And especially when the tech is evolving faster than the workforce pipeline, which is, I'm sure, the biggest challenge.
It is a challenge. So one piece was the DITAP program I just mentioned, but there's also, so FAI is the Civilian Agency Acquisition Training Organization. DAU is the Defense Acquisition Training Organization. I work a lot with FAI. We partner with DAU, but we've gone to a model with a very skinny certification for our new contracting folks. It's a 1 year of classes and then of experience, and they take an assessment. But after that, we've gone into this whole credentials idea where they can get training just in time for skills that they need. One of the credentials that we have available is an AI credential, and we've partnered with Coursera, so they're, you know, top-notch classes. And I was just talking about this at the Chief Acquisition Officers Council meeting yesterday, and I said, I think I need to take that credential myself. So, but we can get folks familiar, and then there's also an AI training program through the GSA AI Community of Practice, and they partnered with Stanford University to come up with some AI training for the entire federal workforce, but focused somewhat on the acquisition workforce. And you can actually find that training at coe.gsa.gov. It was done in 2023, but it's taped. And admittedly, 2 years ago is probably like a million years ago, but I think a lot of the information is still valid. So between those two things, and also there's a push from the CIO office and the CISOs, and Dave probably knows about this, challenging agencies to use AI. They gave them like 6 cases, like start here, and really pushing to push this to the agencies, which means the folks will be using it. I really think hands-on is better than any other kind of virtual or classroom training. So I can see that holding a lot of promise.
That's really exciting, actually. And I love the hands-on aspect. I know that that's, such an important way to learn, especially in the tech segment. And, you mentioned credentials, right? All these credentials. So Dave, are we at risk of overloading our existing teams with new tools before they're equipped to use them? Or what are your thoughts there?
Oh, sure. I mean, we're always at risk of that. But I do think that there are steps you can take to minimize the risk of that. When I talk about AI deployment, one of the things that I try to stress to the agencies, industry, whoever listen to me, is that it is super important for any agency beginning their AI journey to understand what this technology is going to do for them and to understand why they want this technology. You can't do AI for AI's sake. I think that's when you start really running into the risk of overloading your folks because you're just throwing things at them. Hey, do this. Here's this tool. I don't know what you're going to do with it. Go figure it out versus taking a more measured approach and really thinking before you even talk to a vendor, hey, let's understand what we're going to do with this and also how it's going to change our organization because your organization is going to change with a revolutionary technology like AI. Your business processes are going to change, people's responsibilities are going to change, and you have to understand that in advance. And I think the more planning you can do on that side, the less the risk that you're going to overload folks, because what you end up rolling out is something that makes sense to folks. They're familiar with it. They've heard about it. They know it's coming rather than just dumping a bunch of stuff on someone's lap and saying, here's AI, go do your job.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, understanding the journey the tech will bring you on, I think that's really what kind of jumped out at me. So maybe we can talk a minute, Joni, pivoting a little bit to, collaboration, right? And cross-sector collaboration. What's the role of external partners in helping close the gap?
That is huge. Like we are all about, we have a whole series on myth busting. You could go talk to the vendors, imagine that, about any procurements that you have, but also just in the training and development space. So the Federal Acquisition Institute, the civilian agency side of the training, has a completely different model than the defense training. So DAU, the defense training, gets appropriated dollars, and they get like lots of dollars. They have brick and mortar buildings. They hire instructors, instructional designers. They have all these people, and they do a fantastic job, wonderful job. That's why we love to partner with them because they have all the money. But FAI is a little different. They get a little bit of money. So I'd say they operate on a shoestring if compared to DAU, but they do great things. And their model is they don't have teachers. They don't have professors. They hire vendors. So they put the standards out there, they put the curriculum out there, and the vendors come and they do the training for our workforce, and they do a fantastic job. Most of it is virtual instructor led. So ever since COVID, nobody wants to do classroom anymore in our world. So it's been very, very effective, and we love our vendors in both the training and development space and also just in general. We couldn't do our job without our vendors. So the more collaboration we have, they bring their great stories to us, their great ideas, and we love to capitalize on that. We appreciate them hugely.
That's great. And Dave, from your side, are there any barriers you see that make collaboration maybe harder than it should be?
I would say historically, the federal government does not have a great reputation for collaborating across turf lines. That can happen within a large federated agency. It can happen between agencies. In some of the cyber work we do with information sharing, we run into obstacles like that. But, I think that part of it also depends on what you're looking at. Yes, say like cybersecurity, right, which has been around a long time, sharing incidents, those have always happened. When you get into something like AI, which is so new to all the federal government, I think there's huge potential for overcoming some of those sort of inherent biases in how government agencies work with each other. And I'll start at the micro level. It starts with making sure that an agency is partnered with with a private sector company that's going to deliver on what it wants, and vice versa. So starting with a good relationship there, you've got vendors who, right, a lot of these larger ones have lots of government clients. There's lots of opportunity to share lessons learned. There's opportunities to share about, hey, here's what these folks are doing over there. And so I think there are a lot of ways to overcome those challenges and to build a really robust ecosystem of folks who are working in this AI space who view it more as their DNA to share the information rather than to withhold it. And I think that's going to be a huge part about the growth of federal AI and how it rolls out into organizations. And as organizations start to figure out how to use what I call really big AI, they're using small tools right now. But when we get true AI into federal agencies, you're going to have to be partnering with your vendor as well as other agencies to understand how it is they're using this technology and how you can use it more effectively yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. And we've touched on a number of topics so far, from framing the federal IT skills gap to training and reskilling and readiness, and now the collaboration. And we've touched on a little bit, sort of getting the bug and infecting, those to get them to really love what they're doing. But let's touch a little bit about retaining that talent in a modern work environment. So, Joni, once we've trained and recruited the qualified IT professionals, how do we keep them?
I think that's very similar to, in our world, how do we keep these acquisition folks? And I think it's one of probably the most important thing is connecting them with the mission of where they're working, like making them understand that honestly, that agency could not do its mission without their work. And I know a lot of agencies do a good job at that. Some not so good, but NASA is a shining example. Like it's the number one best loved agency in the government. And I think that's why they connect their employees with the mission so much. But in addition to that, removing the roadblocks, like you go into acquisition and you see, like in order to do the smart procurement thing, you have to go, this roadblock, this review, that review. And honestly, in my world before, one person did one thing wrong and all of a sudden all these regulations pop up and everybody has to jump through hoops to not do that. So if you can remove that, which we're doing a lot of that with a revolutionary FAR overhaul, that's a big piece of it. Another thing is provide opportunities. So we really push developmental opportunities, go have a seat in your IT office for 6 months and live their world. And that helps you understand it much better. And that's across the government. Go into a different agency and you can see a very different perspective. We have a lot of detailees at OMB because it's great because we have this government-wide perspective, and they go back to their agencies and they are changed people because they see the big picture. And then one more thing, make them feel really valued. Like our workforce is so critical. We make sure they know that. We make sure they know that we're behind them. We are supporting them in every way that we can with tools, resources. We listen to them and we act on what we hear. And I think all of those things hopefully will help retain all of the government workforce, but especially acquisition and IT.
That makes sense. I love, the four key things, right? Connecting with them with the mission, that let them get that bug and that passion for their mission, removing those roadblocks, those giving those developmental opportunities, and of course, making them feel valued. Really, really great points. Dave, what factors matter most now when it comes to retaining the talent? Do we see that people want post-COVID more flexibility? Is it purpose, the driving the mission? Is it the career mobility? Is there anything that you've seen in the work you do that uncovers, those factors?
Yeah, those definitely pop up, but I think it depends from employee to employee, right? None of us are the same. We all want different things out of our career, and at different points in our careers, we all want different things. And what I've wanted at different points in my federal career has changed over time. But I think that this can all be kind of taken into account by, and I'm going to go back to the framework that I mentioned that GEO developed, looking at an IT or technology workforce. The retention part has four main sections. And we look at the strategic planning for your retention. We look at talent management. These are all things Joni just talked about. I'm just going to put a little structure around them. Employee engagement, which is huge, and employee morale. And those are all things that we view as key to getting folks invested in your organization so that they want to stay and they want to help it grow. You want to make them feel heard. You want to make them feel good about the work they do, but also you want to make sure they have a clear path. And if you're doing strategic planning on this, you're giving them that path that they can follow along. But then you also want to make sure you have a good performance management systems so that employee really knows where they stand, where they need to improve. You want to have good employee engagement so that they are contributing value to the organization. They're looking for ways to offer suggestions to make it feel better, all of which is kind of feeds into the employee morale so that they feel good. And like Joni said, the NASA example is great. Consistently, right? The number one agency in federal government where people want to work. And so I think that's a great example of an organization that's found a way to create that connection with their employees so that, hey, maybe the flexibility isn't great. I'm not really clear about my job, or the career mobility for me isn't ideal right now, but gosh, I love what I'm doing and I want to make this place work better.
That's fantastic. So we keep going back to that bug,
Yep.
help them get the bug, and make it and listen to them. We're all humans, so we need to listen to one another, and that's fantastic. I'm going to pause 1 second. Final poll question of the day. What should be popping up? Which area should be the top priority for federal IT workforce development? So for those of you joining us today, please chime in, and that kind of leads us into our next segment, which Dave, I'd love to talk to you and start with you, about the future workforce. When you think about a future ready IT workforce, what comes to mind?
Well, AI is the big one right now. Cyber advances and it gets more sophisticated and the technologies change, but there are a lot of evergreen principles behind cyber, which is you need to make it secure. AI, I think we're still trying to figure that out. And when you've got a technology that evolves at the speed of light, how do you put the right people in place? I think that in my mind, you need to develop a cadre of folks who are very deeply immersed in the technology, who really kind of understand it, who are going to be able to absorb these changes as new models come out and new advancements in the models. But then I think, and this was brought up earlier, a lot of just-in-time delivery on training. If technology is changing so fast, you're not going to know what skills you need until it's upon you. And so then you need to look for opportunities of getting that just in time training. But if you have that cadre of folks who are deeply grounded in the technology, I would think they'd be able to manage a lot of the worst of the bumps while you bring in folks who can take the smaller ripples.
Yeah, and I think, the whole AI, it's huge, but it's something we're all working feverishly to try to figure out and keep up with. But it makes it exciting too, I think.
Yeah. And I think the other thought, going back to the point I made earlier about especially for AI, understanding how you want your organization to use the technology so that you're thinking ahead to those changes in business process, to maybe you need a change in organizational structure so that, again, where your gaps are and you can make sure you have the right people with the right skills in the right place at the right time.
Yeah. And I think part of that, figuring it out, what you want to do with it, comes with using it at the same time. And it's a constant progression. And I think one of the things we talk about, and I think we had talked about this in a previous webinar, Dave, is that intellectual curiosity too, that wanting to spur that in folks and having them, really embrace it so that they can, again, continue to drive and help propel things forward.
Yep, absolutely.
Great. And Joni, are we preparing for a workforce that's AI literate and cyber aware and agile enough to work across, the traditional silos?
We're definitely working on it, but one piece I haven't mentioned yet that is so important is the culture piece. So in my world, compliance is our life. Like, we know the lines and we stay in the lines, but we are changing everything right now, from the regulations, the rules, to the processes, to adding this AI layer. We really need the culture, which is built by the supervisors, the leaders, all the way up the line, to be able to allow the workforce to do what we've promised them they can do, what we're teaching them they can do. And if we don't do that and we do all these other pieces, it's going to fall flat on its face. But we have a great community, and we love to partner across agencies, across functions. And I think together that we're all collectively pointed in the right direction. And I'm really eager to see what happens when this darn, I wish we had all of this when I was starting in my career. I would have loved some of this stuff, but I'm glad to be a part of it now and to see what happens with it. I think it's full of promise and opportunity.
Yeah, definitely an exciting time. No boring time frame here. Dave, anything to add from your perspective on that?
No, I think, Joni, your point about culture is really good because I think that sums up not very nicely and better than I said some of the points I was making earlier about the change that's coming, right? You want to build a culture that embraces this change, where you've got folks who understand what's happening, who have bought into it, who hear the executive cheerleader who talks about, hey, this is the value proposition, here's what we're going to get out of this. And I think building that culture where you're willing to be flexible because as the technology changes, you're going to have to change a little bit yourselves. I think it's hugely important, and it's not a federal government sort of typical way of doing things, but I think that AI is going to change how the government does things. And so building that culture is, I think, a great way of focusing on what really needs to happen to help future proof your workforce.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think we have one question from the audience, if you both don't mind.
Yeah.
They were asking, the government hiring process can take a long time, and the process itself isn't always, easy to navigate from start to finish for all stakeholders. What do we do about that? And are there ways that we're working towards improving that process?
I will say from the auditor's perspective that this is something that everyone knows about. Yes, the government is our own worst enemy in terms of timely hiring of people. When you see the studies about the cycle times, it's not good numbers. And we lose candidates sometimes. That's, I think, especially if you have a competitive AI or cyber position, right? There's going to be some private sector organization looking to snatch up talented folks. I think it comes from a cultural shift as well as streamlining some of these processes. I know that there's been some effort about hiring reform, which I think is a great first step, looking at how, sort of the initial steps of the management process. As part of the cyber workforce, who traditionally does have trouble recruiting folks to fill empty slots, one thing we've talked about is special hiring authorities, where you're not necessarily bringing in the generalist human capital specialist who doesn't understand the position as well as they might and are writing a position description that isn't great versus leaving it in the hands of the subject matter experts who really know who they need to put in the slot. And so, changes like that I think are slowly happening. Again, this is like changing the course on a battleship. The federal government has done this way for a long time. And so it's going to take some time to really figure out how to pivot and change course so that we can be more efficient with that. But I do think that I've started to see these kernels of things that are starting to change because people recognize we can't keep doing business like this. We need to figure out better, more efficient ways of doing this.
Yeah, and I work pretty closely with OPM. I feel sometimes like I should have a desk over there. I work so closely with them, but they are doing some. So I've been in this government space for a very long time. I've earned some of this white hair here, but I'm excited in that space too. Like they're doing drastic reforms. They're doing metrics. They're trying to improve the whole process for everybody, from the applicant to the agencies. The really interesting thing they've done is to have a limit on resume pages to 2 pages recently. And I think that's for everyone, but as I look at my, 15-page government resume, which I haven't used in years, I'm like, how on earth? But I think this is all leading to a less bureaucratic process, getting better candidates in front of the hiring managers. And I'm excited about that too. I hope it helps all of the problems that you were mentioning, Dave, because I've seen those for years. I'm like, if OPM has one thing to do, let it do this thing. And I see them tackling it now, and I'm like, go OPM, yay.
I think the nugget that I take away from what you're both saying is really knowing and working towards change and striving for improvement. And that's, the key to anything, whether you're in industry, government, or, nonprofits and so on. So I think that's really great. thank you for taking that question off the cuff there. I think we're almost, coming to the end, but before we say goodbye, I'd love to get, dive into some like final takeaways from each of you. So if you had to, pinpoint one insight or takeaway you want our audience to leave with today, what would it be? So Joni, your face is still on my screen, so I'm going to have you answer first, and then we'll go to Dave.
Oh, I hope you don't have my big face on the screen. I hate that. But yeah, okay, my one word is hang on. Like, we're all in this ride for our life. I think it's going to be exciting. Big culture shift. Also, be collaborative, and every single thing that you do will make your job better. But hang on, things will be improving, and we'll be part of that. And I'm really excited about that.
Love that.
Right.
I love the be collaborative. I think that's so key in everything we all do. Dave, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say workforce is hard. It's a challenge. It's for all the reasons we've been talking about for the last 50 minutes. But I do think that for agencies, especially, I'm talking to you, there are a lot of resources out there, including the work we've done, that can provide a pretty good roadmap for starting to get your arms around how to better manage your workforce. No easy answers for that. And yeah, it takes a lot of work. And as Joni pointed out, it's going to take a little bit of investment, but I think that the long-term benefits and returns will clearly make the business case for investing both the time and the resources into putting a little more discipline and rigor around how your specialty technology workforces are managed.
Great. Appreciate that. And I'll throw it back at you, Dave, with one last question. What's something agencies or leaders can start doing immediately to support their workforce development goals?
Absolutely. I mentioned this before. If you don't have one already, develop a strategic workforce plan, both for recruitment and retention. Contact me. I'll give you the guide we used if you can't find it yourself. But I think just having that single document will go a long way to helping provide all that rigor and discipline that I talked about a moment ago in how you manage your workforce.
Yeah, and in our space, honestly, all of the agencies are working towards this little vision that we've conjured during this webinar today. And so I would say, using a television term, call a friend. Like, some agencies are doing it really good. And the more we can collaborate and share, we don't need everybody to figure this out for themselves. There's lots of centralized resources through FAI, through DAU, through OFPP, through GSA. Use those resources and tailor them to your particular situation, and use credentials and just-in-time training. It's already out there. And I encourage to focus on opportunity. Some of this stuff is scary, like it's happening so fast, like AI. Oh, what's AI going to do? Look at the opportunities to it, and honestly, they're unlimited. And like I said, I can't wait.
Love it. And I love the passion and the excitement, from both of you. And I'm sure that our audience appreciates that. Well, I'd like to thank you both. It's been a great conversation. And I really enjoyed it. I think there are a lot of fantastic sort of nuggets that were brought up today, and we're going to pull together some of those key takeaways, and we'll put them out there for everybody. And this has also been recorded, so people will be able to watch the recording. So thank you, to everyone for joining us for another great conversation, especially you, Dave and Joni. You're great leaders in our federal workforce, and just love to. I'll be keeping a close eye on what's to come. And again, appreciate your time. And for everybody who joined us, we have another webinar next week on modernizing public sector infrastructure, where we'll be joined by Ray Longo from the Secret Service and Dr. Nick Hart from the Data Foundation. So check the chat for the registration link. But again, it's been a great conversation. Appreciate everybody joining us, and really appreciate you, Dave and Joni. So thank you.
Thank you. Our pleasure.
Thank you.